To be pretty basic is 1 Corinthians 13, of course, and the part that is bolded there. If I do not have love, I am nothing. In fact, those of you who've seen love2020.com, which is a website we're using to invite people into this prayer, care, share lifestyle of love, has that statement: without love, we are nothing. I think that the message we're trying to give towards people praying, caring, and sharing is we really need to have love at the center of this, as the aroma of this. Because without love, without people perceiving what we do as love, we really accomplish very little, maybe nothing. So that's one that sticks out to me. What caught your eye? And any comment, thought that you have with it? I'm not going to ask everybody, but certainly hope several of you, many of you share. Somebody starts up. Yeah, Mike.
I looked at 2 Corinthians 5:14, for Christ's love compels us. I think that addresses our motivation versus Christ's motivation of love, the nature of his unconditional sacrificial versus duty, obligation, getting more members, getting deadlines, making ourselves feel good. I think this addresses our motivation, and people who are hurting instinctively know what our motivation is.
That's well said. Christ's love needs to compel us so that when we minister to people who are hurting, they know not just that we're trying to help them, but why. And also, as you were talking, I'm thinking so much in our culture, and even right now, timely things of what's happening in Boston, so many other things. So much of our culture, like same-sex marriage and other kinds of political things, the culture is moving so far away. It's hard. I just sense. We say Christ's love compels us to basically tell the culture how bad they are. And I think that his love needs to compel us, but in such a way that even when we speak against something, people are sure it's coming from a place of love. So I think we're struggling with that as a church. Somebody else, what do you got?
John 13:34, actually the second time you listed it in the first page here. He says, love one another just as I loved you. And you realize that the immediate example before them, just as I loved you, was Jesus knew Judas was going to betray him.
Yeah.
Jesus washed his feet, broke bread, offered wine, and then said, just as I loved you, love one another. And that sort of shatters the way we think about who's the one another that we're like as Christians. We spend too much time on who's in, who's out, where Jesus obviously wasn't that discerning for the Last Supper.
Yeah, the love one another, the one another statements in the Scripture and the New Testament are wonderful, but I think what it causes us to do is we need to love one another because the world is so bad. We need to, not be of the world, and so it does create an in and out kind of thing. Good, much appreciated. Charles.
Yeah, I take some of these scriptures for the point that I want to make. A new commandment I give you, that you love one another just as I have loved you. We love because he first loved us. And in both cases, it's a plural. It's speaking about how you love us as a group. And oftentimes we take that us meaning me. And so we picture how Jesus loved me, so I try to love everybody else the way he loved me. But immediately as I started going through this, how did he love Peter? How did he love John? How did he love the woman at the well? We should, if we're going to express love to other people in the way they perceive they're being loved, we need to be as individualistic as he is. And so as we see a great many number of examples of how he loved people differently.
Yeah.
But we become single dimension. And we need to be multi-dimensional just as he is. Because that's what he's saying.
Able to individualize love to each person in that setting.
Right, because that's the you.
Yeah.
He's speaking to a number of people.
Good. Another comment. Or you can make a comment on what another person has said or different scripture. Agree, disagree.
This kind of goes along with Charles, but also what we were talking about when Mike spoke on Romans 12:9. Romans 12:9, love must be sincere, hate what is evil, cling to what is good.
Yeah.
And he was talking about the political thing. And sometimes I think, instead of being angry and mad, we come across as hateful on the abortion issue, same-sex, but coming across to have a dialogue of, we love you, and this is why this is evil, why we hate this evil,
Yeah.
and why we really want this good for you. And I was thinking about Dan Cathy having the conversation with the same-sex individual, inviting him to the Chick-fil-A bowl, and being able to have a dialogue
Yes.
where the guy, instead of hating Dan Cathy and Chick-fil-A, actually had respect for him and his position and why he thought the way he did. And at least it's the beginning of the conversation with the other side.
Excellent example. While you were talking, Patricia, made me think, I don't know if you think of this as a good illustration, but I think the culture sees us as the doctor telling us we have a fatal disease like cancer and then yelling at us because we have it, instead of having compassion and trying to bring some healing. Charles?
See, and I think one of the tests for elder, it says having a good report with those outside of the church. So in this example that she's giving, Kathy has a good report, somebody outside the church, and we interpret that as us being really holy people, oftentimes.
Good point.
Focuses on ourselves again,
Yeah.
rather than how do we love people the way they need to be loved.
We value them, affirm
Right.
them as
They were created in their mother's womb, fearfully, wonderfully made
That's
by
right.
God, just like
Yeah.
we were.
Couple more, another scripture, yeah. John?
I got stuck on the 1 Peter 4:8, and what covers multitude of sins. My first glance was, I think the world sees us, the culture sees us as the moral police, the ethical police, and feeling judged. And then, of course, people talking to the backlash. But really, the context of this verse, I think Peter's talking to Christians when he says, love one another and cover each other's sin. And I think it's the example of a lot of the public criticism that we're throwing at each other. We're shooting our own, just locally things, Pastor falls, and then the Facebook stuff that just goes public, and we're just hammering each other, or more of, the broader things of how much criticism we fire against each other because we don't like each other's theology or position on this or that. And we're not covering each other in love. We're often shooting each other. So how are we doing with covering, letting love cover our offenses, even within the body of Christ? And I'm not talking about cover-up. I think we need to be open and honest, and judgment begins in the church and all of that. But when we go public and shooting each other, boy, the world just goes, hey, I want nothing to do with that.
I get enough of that at work.
Right.
I've heard that.
Yeah.
Yeah, John.
Yeah, I'll add one that's not on the list. From Matthew 25, just Jesus talking about very simply responding to the needs of people. And I think, sometimes I think we may discount that a little bit and say, well, that's going to be more to be like the social gospel. But I actually really think it's all about love. It's all about recognizing that tangible, practical need of that neighbor who doesn't know the Lord and responding to that need because you love them. And I think people really respond to that. I think sometimes, even for our ministry, sometimes people are surprised at places that we're able to get into and be received. And I think a lot of that has to do with just the fact that when they see the care that we have for people. And so they're sometimes willing to almost overlook our Christianity.
Yes, it's a good way to say it.
Because they see the love and the care that we have for people, which I think is open doors. But I really believe that that's what Jesus is talking about. He's talking about just these very simple acts of loving people.
Yeah, some of you may do teachings on spiritual warfare and power evangelism. It's all understand that. That's good. But sometimes when people ask me about spiritual warfare, I say, well, I think one of the greatest weapons we have for spiritual warfare is kindness.
Absolutely.
Hospitality. You know, maybe one of the problems we have with not being perceived as loving is we've turned the gifts of the Spirit and the fruit of the Spirit inward, personal. It's about me, and I do need to be personal and live the disciplines of those things. But it's kind of like we just share with each other inside the church, and I've never thought of, well, am I exhibiting the fruit of the Spirit at work or wherever it is that I live, move, and have my being, especially in situations where people are not being kind to me. Am I still kind? Where I don't feel like I have patience. Am I allowing God to give me patience? Those kinds of things. And then the gifts of the Spirit, I think each one of them has some application in what we might call an evangelistic setting, not just an internal church discipleship setting. So those simple acts of kindness are powerful today. So I've all preached as some of you know. Well,
Just one comment, two passages that really stood out to me is the comment on John 13:34 that I wouldn't build on it, but that connected to 1 John 4:19-21. And I put in that comment, this verse, 1 John says, that puts flesh to my theology. Like I can talk all about it, but if I don't put it into how I love somebody else, it becomes, the verse speaks by itself. And it makes me wonder, knowing that love is a motivator for Jesus to become to this world, is if we truly understand love. And that's part of the disconnect, I wonder. And the second one is the love being the motivator, it elicits that you treat another person with dignity and respect. The imago Dei, making the image of God. I'm not coming to agree with you or what you do or whatever, but you still have intrinsic value in the image of God, and therefore, I would treat you as a human being, but often, I wonder if that gets cluttered with their behavior, but embedded within that we forget that they're a human being. And a lot of times we will probably approach things differently if we uphold the dignity of human being in what we do. And understanding true love, what true love is.
Well, there's so much more. We're just scratching the surface. We're going to move on. But the challenge that I give to myself and to you, all of us, and it was just great to hear the different ministries and places, not just geographical places, but places in the community, the culture that God has put, even in this small group gathered here today. I think our challenge is not just living this. One of the phrases I use is this Love 2020 thing is people say, well, how do we get involved? Well, the first thing is live it. In other words, before you tell other people to do it, using the prayer, care, share terminology. Commit to live a prayer, care, share lifestyle and just go do it. Just because I'm a leader trying to get others to do it doesn't mean that I'm exempt from the need to be obedient in that way. So live it, but then lead it. Where's your sphere of influence? Who are those? Maybe you have a staff that you work with. Maybe there's a Sunday school class. Certainly your family. Maybe a large ministry organization. Live it, but then lead it. Lead them into that kind of lifestyle of love. Inform them, challenge them, give them information, those kinds of things. And then the third thing, because we are leaders, networking with others, as you're living it, as you're leading it, also be linking it. Or maybe I should say linking others to it. And the it is the kind of information, whether it's some of the stuff we have or you have or we find from others, link others to it, especially those who can continue that netting, that networking that goes out. That's what keeps any of the stuff we do from being a program. That's what transforms the events we use to catalyze this kind of lifestyle and the communication of the gospel in a loving context. That's what transforms them from just events, and we'll do another one next year at the same time, and it turns Cedar Rapids of raking leaves at schools and cutting down shrubs and painting stuff from just a nice, polite thing to do into potentially life transforming, because Christ's love compels us. We're making love our aim, and people are sensing that. So let's be leaders at living it, leading it, and linking it with others. How about one or two of you, just where you're at, just pray loud. Let's just say a couple prayers that would come to our mind. Prayer of declaration of God's will, or the desire to see the church become all that it needs to be in this area of living out a lifestyle of love, a couple of you pray as God would lead. Just, you don't have to stand, but just pray loud enough so we all hear you. Somebody start us, please.
Father God, we just pray that you would restore love to your church. Father, where we maybe gotten caught in doctrines or traditions or other things or things that distracted us just in our communities. God, just restore us to a focus of love, Lord, a contagious kind of love that we saw in the first century church, a love that extends way, way beyond the walls of the church. God, a love that is vertical with you, but just as significant, Lord, that's horizontal with our neighbors beyond the walls of the church.
Yes, Lord, we agree. Someone else, please. Someone's praying a good one. Just pray it out loud.
So, Father, we ask you as your followers to forgive us for what we really haven't made our lives known and loved you, and loved others. For us individually, for your church, we're asking that your love impact us in a greater way. That you would help us as you live out your life through us, that we would truly love others. And that in so doing, they might know you. Thank you, Lord.
Amen. Jay, Joel, how would you guys come on up here and grab a microphone? We're going to talk a little bit, maybe help me interview these guys with some questions as we go along and find out not just about their ministry, but how love motivates them and how they are doing, I think, such a great job of declaring the love of Christ. Yeah, just grab one of those mics. Why don't you each just explain your role in this ministry, and then I'll come back to you, Jay, give us a super quick history to get us to where we are. Okay.
My name is Jay Curtis, and I have the wonderful joy of serving as the president and CEO of a ministry called Fox Valley Christian Action. And we really have two arms to our ministry, one we call Riverwoods, formerly known as Riverwoods Christian Center, and then the other side of our ministry we call Riverworks Life Skills Outreach, which is a ministry focused out on the communities, helping to mobilize and equip local churches to reach under-resourced communities around them.
My name is Joel Cara. I serve as the program director at Fox Valley Christian Action, and I have the privilege, alongside with Jay, to be the hands and feet of Jesus and engage in the local church, to love our neighbors, and fan the flame for the body of Christ.
Jay, quickly, this started as a camp. Just give us this super quick chronology here to develop.
35 years and 15 seconds.
There you go.
Okay. Yeah, we began in 1977. Our actual facility in St. Charles, just about maybe 20 minutes or so from here, just straight down North Avenue, began as what was a condemned Christian camp. It was an Advent Christian denominational camp. And the initial heart of it was to take that facility, renovate it, and use it as an outreach to public and subsidized housing communities in Elgin, Carpentersville, and Aurora. But very quickly, and really from the beginning, the focus really went outward to say, hey, how do we also reach out to these communities on an ongoing basis, a year-round basis? And so that community ministry began to develop. We started to place staff members out into the housing communities. That's actually how I became a part of the ministry. A little over 20 years ago, I served in Elgin public housing communities for a few years. And then within the last few years, that same focus continues, but the strategy has changed significantly. Instead of looking at what can we do as an organization through our staff team and our programs to really focus on, instead, how do we equip and empower the local church? And we've got a number of church partners throughout the valley that we are coming alongside of and really trying to build these intentional partnerships to love and care for families out in the housing communities in very practical, tangible ways. And so that's really the kind of strategic shift that we've made in the last 3 years.
Well, how did you get involved with CityReaching?
Yeah.
I hired it.
Yeah.
Well, a wise man is
yeah.
great.
Well, part of it is my own testimony, being a believer for 26 years. That was seeing the gospel lived out. That's the first thing. Somebody was willing enough to be obedient in the gospel, and I really like to place God as my part of my family. And that kind of began the journey of following Christ and all that I do. I've been as part of Taxable Christian Action for about 6 years, but in ministry since I became a believer.
One of the things that I love about what you guys do is there's a lot of even social service agencies that help people. Even if they don't do the name of Jesus, people are being blessed. That's great. You guys do that. But you're doing it from a value system, a perspective. I'm not sure the best words to use, but you guys can fix it up here. But I just love to see the components of the heart of Jesus serving the needs of those who are most desperate. That comes through. The church is so important. You talk about this strategic change, it might have been your word or whatever. The church is vital. You're doing stuff with pastors. Of course, you see individuals, but you're seeing communities. I'm not sure what the question is, other than unpack that a little bit. Those elements and how they come to form, and maybe there's other elements that you want to add that make this such a long-lasting and impacting kind of ministry. Not that I'm criticizing someone who just collects some food and hands food out of the pantry. I'm not saying that's not good, but I just love the scriptural philosophical structure of what you do. So go from there somewhere.
Wow. Okay, that was a broad. But as you were framing that question, there was a story that came to mind. So let's share that story and now hang it well and bring it home. So, a little over 20 years ago, I mentioned that I was serving as a community staff in 3 public housing communities in Elgin. It was just a phenomenal time in my life, really getting engaged with the families and loved what God was doing there. And I got this phone call one morning. People talk about separation of church and state. You can't bring Christianity into schools and all this other kind of stuff. And I really challenge that. I know we talk about that sort of politically, and you hear that publicly. I think in reality, our experience has been very different from that. I hear that from a lot of other community-focused ministries that are really getting engaged. I'm hearing great openness within the schools. So I get a call one morning, and it's a school social worker, and she says to me, hey, we have this young boy, and his name is Stacy, and he's just out of control. We don't know what to do with him. We can't connect with his family. We just don't know what to do. And she said, the only time that I ever see or hear anything positive in him is he kept talking about your ministry. And she said, finally out of desperation, I looked you up in the phone book, where my phone books. So I looked you up in the phone book, and I'm calling, can you help us? I mean, this is a public school. It's a public school social worker. She was not a believer, but she said, can you help us? And we did, and we were able to intervene, and we had a free pass, into the schools to be able to work with the school, work with this young man. Unfortunately, he was in a terrible home situation. His mother had a severe drug addiction, and so he had been pulled out of the home at a very young age. All of his siblings had been, pulled out of the home shortly after their birth and things like that. And so we were able to be there. And to me, again, it comes back to what I shared a few minutes ago about, kind of this Matthew 25 principle of loving and caring for people in these tangible, practical ways that, the world is willing to overlook. I mean, the school is willing to kind of overlook our very clear Christian focus to say, we need help here, and it opened the door for us. And I think that's really characteristic of our ministry, because we have that same kind of openness with, secular housing authorities and, government offices and things like that. We get a lot of cooperation from places who wouldn't expect cooperation, but it's because the love and the care is very tangible and practical.
Some might say, Well, that's because they know that you're Christians, but you really don't preach the gospel. But the gospel never gets verbalized or no seeds planted. I'm not sure the best way to say it. It's because they know you're Christians, but you're just nice guys. And that's why this works out. I don't think that's true.
Not true.
Okay.
Not true. Yeah, I mean, we are very open everywhere we go. That our passion is to see lives transformed by the gospel. We want to see kids and families walking in a life-transforming relationship with Jesus Christ. And one of the nice things about being a little bit independent in those situations, we're not dependent on government funding. We weren't invited into the school or into the housing authority on a government grant or anything like that. We are there independently, and so then we can do what we want to do. And we choose to share gospel stories, or pray, or invite church partners in to be a part of things. Nobody can really quibble with it because we were invited there, and we're not there under anybody else's umbrella. So we've had a lot of freedom, and we're very committed to seeing the transforming power of the gospel.
If I make a comment, when I had the privilege to obviously hire and interview a lot of folks that had worked for us during our year-round programming and summer programming, and when they asked me, so what is it that you want me to do? What's the it? I said, first of all, your role here is to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ unapologetically. It is your job to make it come alive. Use any means that you can possibly use in order to make them real and tangible to people. The second one, treat people with dignity and respect. We work, with all sorts of constituents, primarily African American, Hispanics, and obviously all sorts of ethnicities, but people are people. Jesus died for them all, and treat them with dignity and respect as made in the image of God. And the third one, that I call it, and you have a job to do. Yeah, I always have goals, objectives, and all the good stuff, but how can you, maybe it's a personal value for me, I view myself as a spiritual investor. I invest in the future, in kingdom stuff. How can this decision, this phone call, this meeting builds the church? Jesus Christ is coming for it, and how can we use and leverage those relationships that Jay is talking about, whether with the school or with other entities, for that aim, for one soul, or maybe a group of people that don't have as many resources, or a group of people that lack certain knowledge or whatever. How do we motivate the love of Jesus in the midst of these constituents? Yes, sir?
In your introduction, you talked about a strategic shift from just you and your staff doing a lot of work to empowering the church. My question is, how's that working? How's that going? What's the response of local churches to that shift that you're making? And specifically, is this the same Fox Valley that Randy's in?
Yes.
And how are you guys interfacing with that network?
You want to answer this first? How are they doing?
Yeah.
Could you repeat the question for the recording?
The question is, Jay and Joel have talked about a shift from, and these are my words, maybe not theirs exactly, but from asking the church to come and work with them, but really to come and help our ministry and make it stronger, to where they are there to equip the church to love, if you will, using our language this morning. And to me, that's a seismic shift, and it's a God thing. And every time in any of the meetings that these guys call, when they convene pastors and leaders together, I hear that, and also in every one of those meetings, Randy's there. And so Pastor Randy Shue from Aurora, how are they doing? Then I'll let them answer that.
They're doing awesome, doing really well. To me, Riverwoods is and always has been kind of an awesome premier example of how to do ministry right, especially what some might call parachurch ministry. That it's not just about them being out there doing their own thing separately. It's deep connectedness with the local church, and even helping to connect churches in the same city. Right now, we are in a planning process with one of their staff members, seeing how us as a local church, in partnership with a couple of other local churches and Aurora Ministries, can help to connect with some of these youth and some of these housing communities for their week of camp coming up in July. And it's great just being part of that process, because it's not just about 6 days for kids from Aurora going up to camp, but it's relationships that are built that then continue on throughout the life of the local church So a lot of residual effect, a lot of, focus on the community and connecting with the local church.
Well, thanks, Randy. Randy has just been a wonderful partner to us and always a great encouragement. We're very thankful for Warehouse. To your question, how's it going? In some ways, it's like a roller coaster. The best way to put it. I mean, just reality. I think when we started 3 years ago, just to really condense it, when we started 3 years ago, as we were sensing the Lord calling us to the shift, and some of it was even a little repentant on our part, a little repentant from the standpoint of, why did we think that we could do this on our own? Why did we think the church should be plugging into what we're doing instead of, hey Lord, how do we equip and empower and build your church? So we had to go through some repentance in that. But I think as we started to make that shift, we really thought it was all going to be about motivating the church. Hey, if we could motivate the church, if we could elevate the needs of the families in the housing communities, if we could help the church to understand that these needs are real, then we made the assumption, and again, I'm repenting of this and I'm being transparent with you, but we made the assumption that if the church was motivated, then the church would just take off and the church would do it. And I can remember sitting in meetings with staff members, pounding on the table and saying, if the church wants to do this, they'll figure it out. They'll figure out how to do every other ministry, they'll figure this out. And what we really learned over, I would say, probably the last 18 months, 2 years, is that very quickly, as we started to share this with our churches, churches in the Valley, they were motivated very quickly. Yes, we want to do this. This is great. We want to move forward. But then very quickly, they turned around and they said, but how do we do this? What do we do? And you need to give us step-by-steps. You need to give us tangible, practical ways to go about this. And that caught us off guard a little bit. I don't think we were as prepared for that. We had been really thinking about how do we motivate the church, but not as much maybe how do we equip the church. So over the last year, and actually Phil and Randy have both been a part of this, and some other pastors as well, we're starting to develop some tools and some strategies for the church. So when church pastors or church lay leaders say, we want to go, and we can say, well, here's some steps that you can take. And we're developing some other tools that are going to be rolling out here pretty soon to get those in the hands of pastors.
Just follow up to that. Would those tools be available then for other communities? Could our community have access to some of those tools?
Repeat
the
the question.
Yeah, so the question was, would those tools be available to other communities? The answer is yes. I have to admit that's a little weakness of ours. We don't always think about how we would roll this out to other places because we really feel God has called us Fox Valley Focus. But others are saying the same thing. So yes, we're going to learn how to do that. And we're actually, they don't know, but we're meeting with kind of a strategic partner here in about 10 days. And there's somebody that I think can really help us with that. We'll see if the Lord has put that in their hearts too.
And if I may, what Jay said, some of those tools that we're going to believe that could be helpful to equip the church, I believe will be probably 80% helpful to your own context, because a lot of those are foundational things that we have sees as ministry stuff that is helpful to you guys. How did you put your own net or whatever? So we're looking forward to kind of put them out there. Not to say that we know all, but rather, hey, a lot of that is just prepare, a lot of it is humility, a lot of it is trying things and say this does work, but the aim is the same. How do we equip the church to be the church? And I believe could be an incredible tool for any ministry, in my opinion. And just for your initial question, Pastor John, that you say, how's that going to engage in the church? Jay said goes up and down and all good stuff. But in the midst of it, in the mystery of the gospel, God is doing amazing stuff. And I was reminded of two stories. I'm going to be brief on these two. Two of those is a small group for a church in the valley that says, hey, we don't even know. We read this book. It's a small group for a local church that we would love to kind of take the next step. We don't know what that will look like. We don't know any other stuff. But we know you do a lot of stuff in our community. Can we do something? Sure. So that happened late in the fall, and it's pretty cool to see those transitions taking place. We didn't dictate what the church, what this specific group should do, because we can, but we create an opportunity for them to live out their faith. And there are relationships that have of it, we don't even know what they're doing, which is our intention in our heart, because our heart is raising the awareness that is a need in your own context, in your own backyard, and for them to figure it out how they want to respond, knowing of the need, and being sensitive to the Holy Spirit. That's a very cool story that is taking place right before us. The other one is something that took place, let me see, it's a Monday or last Friday, so a little over a week, let's say a week ago. And one of the communities that we served year-round, it was a fireman. And we happened to be the 8 people that God was aware of it. And you think like, well, that's kind of backwards. You know, it's one of the communities where you have presence for 30-some years. No, it was true, obviously, but the first line of response was the church. And that was pretty cool. The church already was doing their thing, and which, oh, by the way, so-and-so, we just want to make you aware this took place, and we put in place A, B, and C, and D, because at the end of the day, that's what we want. And at the end of the day, 20 years from now, our heart is that we want that the families that we've been serving, coming alongside, that they are integrating a local church when they love Jesus. The name of the ministry, they may not even remember it, but we want them to remember they connected to a local church where we met Jesus.
Jay, last word, then we got two guys coming up.
Yeah, one thing too, just to really kind of recap that, something that Phil actually helped us with probably a year ago, year and a half. One of the things we were wrestling with as the church kept asking us for tools, we sensed that they were, we didn't know what it meant. And what Phil helped us to understand was the difference between a program and a process. Because one of the things Laurel and I, and just as we just prayed about this and just kept going before the Lord, we kept sensing the Lord say, don't create programs. And that was the temptation. The temptation for us was, well, could we create this program and kind of put it in a box and just say, here church, here's step A, B, C, D. Phil and some others really helped us to understand that what we needed to do was help the church think about a process of engaging that community and taking those steps. And that's more involved. I mean, that's not as easy to just jump into because it's not an ABC thing. But we really believe that it's the way that we're going to help the church to engage in a way that makes sense for the local church. And that's been a little confusing for some of our church partners. But I think it's also been really freeing once they understand it, because what we keep saying to them is, we're not coming to you with an agenda. We're not coming to you to say, your congregation should do X, Y, Z in this community. What we're coming alongside and saying is, how can we help your congregation find what God's place is for you in this community? We know that God is calling the church to care for the poor. What's your place in that, and how can we help you find that? And then once we've identified it, then because we have a lot of practical history in these communities and relationships, we can help you flesh it out in a practical way.
Yeah, it's been done over a long period of time. These guys have the trust of pastors and leaders, and it's because they love them. They're not just doing a program. It's kind of neat. Hey, let's say thanks to these two as Ross. Mike and Ross are from the Modesto area, and I've just asked them to talk a little bit